O'Reilly. I'm your host for today's half hour with the Marshals. Please join me in welcoming the showrunner and EP, Spencer Hudnut. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, can you give us sort of a quick overview of Marshals, which I know is the number one news series on television?
Thank you for that. Yes. So Marshals really is, it tells the next chapter in Kayce Dutton's story from the end of Yellowstone. And it's really about him joining an elite unit of U.S. Marshals who are on the front lines of our nation's war on violence. And they are out in Montana.
Why don't we take a look at the trailer?
Right.
My family's had this land for almost 150 years. The only thing I ever wanted was taken from me. This a wellness check?
It's more like a no man left behind kind of thing. I know you got your own demons to conquer, but jumping back into the fire is gonna do you right.
And I'll get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Welcome to the U.S. Marshals. Hey, Kayce, you're my Marshals.
I've never shared he was buddies with Kayce Dutton. Something special about him?
Legends I heard on the res made him out to be Rambo and a Stetson.
Does any of this ring a bell? No, but I dig his hat.
Everybody's got to be dialed in. Rough terrain, got wild animals, and two violent gangs.
30 seconds.
Fitting in already, cowboy.
Montana's been infiltrated by the most violent criminal network in this hemisphere.
Where's the deal going down?
Just over the Wyoming border, a place called the Zone of Death. This job always takes us to the best places.
My home has become a beacon for the devil. We're under attack from all sides. You can't outrun your past. The wrong side of the fence can always find you.
Building walls shuts out the people that you care about.
They're not walls, they're shields.
The Dutton's personal agenda is always a service for some form of vengeance.
Well, Yellowstone's gone. Same for most of my family. And as for vengeance, day's still young.
Let's go. Not lacking ways to die in Montana. Explains a lot about you.
Again, congratulations on the show and the success of it. Not sure if I mentioned it's the number one news series. Um, and for continuing on the Yellowstone universe. I know this is a big world, but I'm sort of curious what it was about the character of Kayce that made him the ideal focus for a new series.
Well, I think, Casey's really to me, is one of the more iconic characters of the last decade. I think it's his combination of his skills as a cowboy, also his backstory as being a Navy SEAL. He really does have such a strong moral compass, even though in Yellowstone he did sort of veer outside the lines often, but he, for the most part, was always doing maybe not the right thing in the moment, but for the right reasons. And he's someone who I think is always seeking justice. And so I think that really resonated with people. And I think he just offered up this really, and all he's gone through in his past also makes him really empathetic as a first responder. And so most situations that he would find himself in as a U.S. Marshal, he has some form of experience with, and this is a guy whose son has been taken from him, whose father was assassinated. He just has this incredible ability to relate to people going through really hard times. And so I think for all those reasons, he really jumped out as a guy who would be a great lead of a CBS series.
And I could be wrong, but I think Marshals is the first network show from the Yellowstone world.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that it has this procedural element, but it's also so much more. Can you sort of talk about the world you wanted to create, which, it pays homage to its predecessor, but it's also completely its own thing.
That's really been the trick with it. It is trying to, when I first met on this show, it wasn't, let's come up with an idea for Kayce. It was let's come up with an idea with Kayce for CBS. And so we knew that we had to be in that sandbox and have a procedural engine to the show. But at the same time, coming from the most popular show of the last 10 to 20 years, we would be fools to turn our backs on that backstory. So I think the balancing act is really trying to find enough of a procedural engine that it can maintain an audience's attention on CBS, but at the same time also have enough of Kayce and the Duttons to please the Yellowstone audience too.
Well, the show works so well even if you're new to these characters, but you know, the love for I guess the Taylor Sheridan universe and Yellowstone does run so deep. Why do you think people are so invested in these characters?
I mean, I think Taylor did. I mean, Taylor's such a phenomenal writer. I've been a fan of his since really his first movie, and I think Yellowstone. What's the success of Yellowstone? Everyone, it's has great violence. It has amazing soap, but it's really he has these characters that there's someone that everyone we can all relate to. And for me, it was Kayce. For a lot of people, it's Beth. For other people, it's John Dutton. And I think he just has these grounded characters who, it's such a strong knit family with so many problems that I think everybody can relate to that. And so I think one of the challenges for this show has been trying to, take this character and put him on his own away from that family and still have him resonate with an audience.
They're also just such fun shows. I was trying to describe one of them the other night to someone. I was like, it's just fun.
Yeah.
Because you can simultaneously enjoy it and go, thank God I'm not those people.
Yeah. No, there's definitely, and Taylor does, there's no rules for Taylor that he's following. He's able to just do whatever he wants. And I'm very envious not only of his creative mind, but also just sort of the freedom that he's had. But yes, those shows are first and foremost fun. They're an escape, they're a release, and he just tells really, really good stories.
Now, when this series opens, we learn that Casey's wife, Monica, is no longer with us. Can you talk about, making that decision and, how it obviously affects his character in the show?
Yeah, that was a decision that was honestly made before I put pen to paper, and unfortunately, I'm a huge fan of Kelsey's. I would have loved to have worked with Kelsey, but it just didn't work out that way. But it did. I kind of knew when we were figuring out this show. Kayce has such a great ending to Yellowstone. He really finally gets what he wants. He has his plot of land, he has his wife, and he has his son. And so to get him to go back to a life in law enforcement, we knew that we were going to have to turn that on its head a little bit. And so, once we realized we didn't have Kelsey, for me, it became how do we honor that character? How do we carry that character forward? Because that was such an intense love story. And she really was Casey's anchor, and his son is probably the other anchor in his life. So moving forward, I really, we wanted to not exploit her death necessarily. The decision to have her die from cancer that could be tied back to her growing up on a reservation where toxins had been dumped on it. It was just really, it was an attempt to shine at least a spotlight on that. And in my mind, she's overseeing Kayce throughout this journey. She really, even in the pilot, if you really scrutinize it, Tate goes to the rally because of his mother, Kayce goes to the rally because of Tate. And if not for Monica, Kayce probably doesn't find this new path, and he probably continues to struggle both as a single parent and as a guy who's lost his purpose in life.
Hmm. And Luke Grimes is he's so good as Casey and obviously knows this character so well after playing him for such a long time. It must be nice to have someone who brings so much knowledge and experience to the role. Like, you can say, what was he doing on this day? And he'll give you a whole backstory.
Yeah, Luke is first and foremost an incredible guy. I feel so great. It's such a nice person to partner with. He's such an artist. The pilot, the opening of the pilot is, as much as I want to take credit for it, that was his idea. So he's a really great creative mind and collaborator. And yes, one of the hardest parts about Yellowstone coming in and taking a spinoff from Yellowstone is, normally in this situation you would hire writers from that writers room. So you have people with that institutional knowledge, but like that's just Taylor. And I'm not going to call Taylor and be like, what was Kayce thinking in this moment? So Luke, to me, really provides a lot of that institutional knowledge. And, he does know Kayce better than I. And it's almost a little bit of a relief to know that
Yeah.
there's someone here who knows this character better than I do, who can be a real sounding board. And throughout this first season, we really, there were certain conversations about certain relationships this character was going to have, and really, me going to him to make sure that we were doing it right and that it all felt organic to the character that he'd played for so many years.
Wow, that's great. You have like a consultant right there with you all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I am curious because you bring some new actors into this world and they're fantastic. I mean, can you talk about sort of finding the right chemistry with Luke and like, actors like Ash Santos and Logan Marshall Green? I always think it's funny that maybe Logan Marshall Green got the role because his name is Marshall.
Yes, that was it. That
That's
was
it. That's it. That's all it took.
That's the depth of my research there. No, Logan is, I've known of Logan for 20 years. He's an incredible actor. In fact, he was on a very short list of people that I wanted to bring into SEAL Team if we had continued forward with that show. So I've been a fan of his for a long time. He's an incredible actor. He's so talented. And he and Luke, to their credit, this show came together very quickly. We did not have months and months of prep on this, but the week, 2 weeks before we started shooting, those guys went off and took some hikes together. And so when we started shooting those scenes where you really needed to buy in that this was someone important in Casey's life, because this is someone who's going to get Kayce Dutton to make a change, which is, not in Casey's nature. And so just, we needed an actor who could sell that kind of brotherhood immediately. And so Logan was the obvious choice. And then, Ash Santos is such a find. She's one of the favorite people I've ever worked with. And that's a hard role to pull off. And when we were casting it, we had some casting sessions and it felt like it was going to be a really difficult find. And in fact, David Glasser, executive producer and my partner in this, turned to me and was like, we just really need our own like Zoe Saldana. And Ash walked in 12 seconds later and we both looked at each other and she just nailed it from the start. And then Ariel Cabell, she did a show that my wife produced many years ago, so she's been on my radar. I did write Belle with her in mind. Didn't think I would ever be able to get her. And then Tatanka Means brings so much to Miles. And then to have Brecken and Gil Birmingham and Mo Brings Plenty back from Yellowstone also just really helps with that connective tissue back to the mothership.
What were sort of the thinking? What was sort of the thinking, and who you would bring back, and who you because again, it works so well on its own, but I love having that tie back to Yellowstone as well.
Yeah, no, it wasn't until pretty far along the development process that we found out that we would actually have Gil and Mo, which I think just brings so much more depth to the show. I think those characters are really, Casey, by the end of Yellowstone, has so few people in his life, and particularly where we find him at the start of this show, they're almost an extension of his family. And the way Chairman Rainwater and Casey became brothers in the finale of SEAL Team of Yellowstone, excuse me, is such a powerful scene. So we really wanted to build off of that, and so exploring their personal connection throughout this season has been really fun. And so yeah, I mean, there's constantly like, hey, can we get that Yellowstone person? Can we get this Yellowstone person? So we have a couple more surprises up our sleeve.
I was wondering, okay. Do you find like I just assume everyone watched Yellowstone, but like someone like my mom who still only knows that there's, four network channels, it loves this show and it's all new to her. She doesn't have any of the backstory. Do you find that you're, reaching a new audience?
I definitely have been surprised that the I'm hearing from people all over the place. I'm hearing from people I went to college with I haven't talked to in 20 years. So I think being on broadcast it raises the profile in a way that I think a streaming show has a harder time with. And obviously the power of the Yellowstone brand is so enormous. But I think CBS, there are CBS viewers who hadn't watched Yellowstone who are taking to the show, which is really rewarding. And then there are Yellowstone viewers who, are sharing their opinion with me too, who maybe it's not their cup of tea, but hopefully the Dutton Ranch will be more what they're
You
looking.
don't read the comments, do you? Come on, you know better than that.
Of course I do. I'm a masochist. Yes, that's what you sound like my wife. Yeah.
That's weird. I feel like the response has been really warm.
The response has been great. I think there is an element. What was so great about Yellowstone is you couldn't put it in one box. And so I think there's people who watch that show because of Kevin Costner. They watch that show because of Beth and Rip. And so they watch that show because of Casey. And so I think the shift to a procedural engine was a little jarring for some of them. But I do think, overwhelmingly, I'm so grateful to all the people who are tuning in and, really starting to invest in these characters.
I love that the show is set in Montana, although I think you shoot on location in Utah, but either way, it's these stunning, stunning backdrops. Can you sort of talk about what led to the choice to shoot there and how does that amazing setting help inform the story?
No, I mean, the Yellowstone, obviously, the locations and landscape are a character in that show. And I think a lot of, that show really took off during COVID. And I think it's not a coincidence that people enjoyed watching a show set out in the wide open while we were all shut inside. And so we are shooting in Park City, Utah, on the same sound stages that they shot the first two seasons of Yellowstone. And actually, where Casey's house is the same ranch where they shot a lot of Yellowstone in the first two seasons.
Really?
So, I think when you're out there, It really focuses you on, you're just out in nature. Obviously the healing power of nature and man versus nature are themes from Yellowstone that we're carrying forward. I, of course, like a year ago, was like, we can just shoot it in LA. It'll be great. I don't have to go anywhere. But once I got out to Park City and looked around, I was like, well, yeah, we have to do this here.
Yeah. That's so interesting because the only time I've been to Park City is, for Sundance. And I think of Park City as like one street in a little town.
Yeah.
I didn't get to appreciate the beauty.
It's incredible. No, everyone, a lot of our crew comes from LA, and a lot of our crew are now talking about buying places out there and wanting to stay. And and Utah's been a great partner in this for us as well.
And I'm guessing it's a pretty big crew because you have this, sprawling ensemble. And also, this show is so many things at once, the way you pull off, the mystery and the drama. What's been sort of the biggest challenge of pulling it off logistically?
I mean, coming from such a big show as Yellowstone, and trying to keep the same scale and scope. But truthfully, we're a CBS show, so we have a fraction of their budget. We shoot it in half the time. Some of these episodes were shot in 6 days, which is crazy to shoot 45 pages in 6 days with the type of action we're doing. And so really putting the crew together, building this team it was so important to find people who could, work quickly, work efficiently, really care about what they're doing. And so we are blessed with a crew who are so invested in this show, so invested in the work they do. And truthfully, a lot of it was trying to poach people from Yellowstone and me taking people from SEAL Team that I knew could work quickly in this kind of environment.
That's so wild because it is like a movie every week. I can't believe how quickly you have to shoot it. And forgive me for not knowing the numbers, but a season of network television tends to be a lot longer than streaming. So, with one season, you've probably already done, 15 to 20 episodes.
Yes, no, the first season was 13. We start shooting again in about 4 weeks, and we're doing 20. Going to
Wow.
be shooting from May into December, which is a little daunting. But again, that's why you have to have people around who have done it before. I mean, it's streaming and network television are apples and oranges. It's a different mindset, and it took us a little while to get out of the gate from a production standpoint to really evolve from, again, we wanted it to look and feel as much like Yellowstone as possible, but sometimes it's just not actually possible.
You're obviously also a writer on the show. I think you wrote the first two episodes and the season finale. When you're writing, do you have your producer hat on, or do you ever just like write what you want and then you're like, oh my God, I have to pull this off?
I think after doing so many seasons of both network television and even SEAL Team when it moved to streaming was a network budget and network sort of timeline. So I think it's just kind of baked in at this point that oh, I have to stay inside the lines here. But as I say to the writers in the writers room, we want, let's get the story first, and then we'll put our producer hats on. But it is a balancing act for sure. So you always need to keep in mind of, we can't just go one place and use it for a one-page scene. We have to really utilize that location, and or maybe we can't get the three helicopters in here because we're not a streaming show. So yeah, it's as the showrunner, bringing it in on time and on budget is on top of it, hopefully creatively uh, connecting with people. Those are the three big jobs.
And you can't just blame the writer. You can't say, why did the writer do this?
I know. I try, but then I realize, yeah, where that finger's pointed.
I'm curious in that writer's room, how do you keep coming up with ways to sort of surprise people or catch them off guard, especially with the procedural element, because, audiences are today have seen a lot of these, and I feel like I'm still surprised by where the stories go.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. I think, you're right. I mean, there's so many hours of network television about, police dramas. Every type of case has been done. And that's where I think, where we've been so fortunate is that Amy Reisenbach, who's the head of CBS Network, really gave us so much creative flexibility. It was never, hey, make us a procedural. It was make us a non-traditional procedural, which
Mm.
for us, I think means being able to lean into character. It really, we start our show, so many other CBS procedurals would start with a body in the middle of Times Square. And we start with Kayce out training his horse, or fly fishing with his son. And so I think for us, it's really leaning into the characters and having a lot of the surprises be motivated by what's gone on with our characters, choices they make, or their backstory. And so I think that helps it feel hopefully a little fresher than maybe just doing a tried and true case of the week.
As a writer, do you ever struggle with writer's block or have those periods of time where just nothing seems to be working?
I do, yes. I have just experienced it very recently writing the season two premiere. I think it's you can't help but sometimes, get boxed in or paint yourself into a corner or, have a little bit of, coming up with something new and fresh. How are we going to keep this audience surprised? And so, we're all human. I just truthfully just put the finishing touches on post of season one on Wednesday. So, been going for about 16 straight months on this show. So that you have your moments where you're kind of feeling a little fatigued, but then, you watch an episode, you get to I saw Luke and the whole cast last week, and it sort of recharges your batteries, and so it's I think we never want to just feel like something's good enough, and so as a writer, it can be a process to get it to a place where you feel like it's worthy of our audience.
And I would think, as you get to know these actors more and more, maybe you can write more to their voice or especially like with the second season coming up, you really know their strengths.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that even you start to feel that early. I keep telling people I feel like we really found our footing by about episode 4 or 5 of season one. And some of that is even me just having been on set and really getting to know these people who are bringing these characters to life. And I also think recognizing for myself that maybe in the first few episodes of the show, I was trying to do more of a Taylor Sheridan impression than I should have. And, like Taylor's a singular voice and I'm not that. And so not every character needed to be like, oh, this is the Teeter character from Yellowstone or this. And so I think a lot of that was just me kind of also finding my own voice for these characters as the season went along.
You hadn't worked with Taylor before, correct?
I had not.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I don't want to say you were a super fan, but obviously you were an admirer of his work. You appreciated his work. What was it like? I don't know if like showrunners audition the way actors do, but you got to balance, your intimidation and awe with like your ideas for a show.
Yes, no, as I say to people, and as a showrunner, you deal with TV stars, you deal with heads of network, you deal with really powerful people. And when I sat down across from Taylor and it was on Zoom, I literally couldn't get a word out at first. I was very starstruck, and as a writer, anytime you're in a meeting with you want to be the smartest and best writer in the room. And in that moment, I was just like, I bow down to the you. So, but he was incredibly gracious. I, presented him with an idea for the show that he within 90 seconds kind of just played with the clay a little bit and Marshals came out of that first meeting. And so yeah, no, he's been an incredible partner in this and I'm super grateful to him for the world he created, these characters he's created in Kayce and Mo and Rainwater and Tate. And so it's I feel very fortunate. And again, yes, as a fan, I was just happy to be sort of considered for this show. And then it was like I had all these sort of pinch me moments of like, this is Taylor Sheridan I'm talking to right now. And the first day on set when Luke showed up in the cowboy hat, I was like, oh my gosh, that's Kayce Dutton. This is crazy. What am I doing here?
I love that. And as I said, you've already been greenlit for a second season. Considering the massive, critical and audience success of the first, do you sort of feel this additional pressure going into that, or is it the opposite? You feel really confident now?
I feel there's certain elements where you feel confident. I think that's on the production side where we learned a lot season one of what, the show's capable of and what, how to avoid some mistakes. I think as a creative, the sort of creative engine behind the show, there is, we have to raise the bar. I want these characters I want the audience to embrace these characters even more. Again, I don't want anybody to ever feel like they're on a hit show and we've arrived. A lot of the show's success is because we're coming in on the heels of Yellowstone. So I think around season 4, I've told the writers we're allowed to take a little bit of credit, but we want to push the envelope in season 2 as much as we can and really, continue to try to entertain our audience.
Can you tell us anything you have planned for season two? Just walk us through the first episode. Fade in.
Yeah, I would really like to, but the first episode starts about 4 seconds after the season finale, so I don't want to spoil the season finale for anybody. But I think season two is going to be, again, I think we're really trying to even take a step up from what we've done in season one.
Well, we always like to end with, a final question, which is, what's one thing about this series that stands out to you that you would, recommend to someone, or you would point out to someone who hasn't had a chance to check it out yet?
I think what we try to do is, I think again, we're first and foremost tasked with entertaining people. But I think what we're trying to do is also get under the hood a little bit of what it's like to be on the front lines as a first responder in this country, what the cost and consequences of being someone who's willing to run into the fire is. And then I think also an element of the show that is really, I'm really grateful for, and I think we did a fairly good job of in season one, is being able to shine a spotlight on this Native American community on Broken Rock, and really, some of the troubled areas there. And we did this two-part episode on children who go missing on reservations, which is really a huge problem. And so I think there's just it provides the show with a little bit of a soul, beyond what I think just a normal cop show would be.
Hmm. Well, again, thank you so much to Spencer and our friends at Paramount Television Studios and CBS for joining us today. And to everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us today for this half hour with.
Thanks so much.